Yes, I think what you're seeing now is beyond that kind of capacity driven collaboration. Now you have the concerns that are growing in all four of these countries independently in their interactions with China. And Chinese behavior, rather than the kind of opportunity or kind of public goods, if you will, that they could provide through their capabilities in disaster response. Now it's really the way that China is behaving in the region that's pulling these four countries together. Japan, of course, sits on the east coast of the Chinese mainland, has had its territorial disputes with China. Chinese growing military capability in and around Japan has become very worrisome for the Japanese. The Australians now have a very tense relationship with China, and Australia has long had a very deep engagement economically with China and has resisted any kind of effort to think of China as the adversary. But China and Australia today differ on some very significant issues. Some of them had to do with the emergence of the COVID-19 pandemic. Some have to do with Chinese behavior inside the territorial boundary of Australia. So you have a very tense relationship, including trade tariffs and a kind of tit for tat escalation in that diplomatic relationship, very different from the past decades. And India too now has there's a reigniting of the border dispute between China and India. There is, like all of the other three countries, of course, India has a deep economic interdependence with China, but Chinese military power and their willingness to use that power to challenge Indian security interests has also made many in India quite concerned about the rise of China, and in particularly not the rise of Chinese power so much, but the way in which China is asserting its interests and not afraid to use coercive means with its neighbors. So I think today in the Quad, you're starting to see a reaction that largely is driven by Chinese behavior. Nonetheless, you still see, as I mentioned earlier, decades later, you're still seeing a Quad that is very hesitant to define itself in military terms, but rather tends to emphasize its economic ties and the ability of the four countries to try to come together to build their resiliency.